Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Constable Crane. This is a song we've heard from you more than once. Now, there are two courses open to me. The first is to let you cool your heels to the cells until you learn respect for the dignity of my office. Which brings me to the second course. There is a town 2 days' journey to the north in the Hudson highlands. It is a place called Sleepy Hollow, an isolated farming community, mainly Dutch. 3 persons have been murdered there, all within a fortnight, each one found with the head lopped off. Clean as dandelion hairs, apparently. You will take these experimentations of yours to Sleepy Hollow, and there you will detect the murderer. Bring him here to face our good justice. Remember, it is you, Ichabod Crane, who is now put to the test. Hi, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 155th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast. We take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that strange constable who goes on talking about the virtues of using science to solve crimes about our humble little show. And by all means, avoid headless swordsmen on horseback. Now, I am glad to be with you today to discuss today's movie. And it is a classic. At least it's a classic in my heart. I remember when this movie came out, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And what we're about to talk about is Sleepy Hollow. I can't remember when I first saw it, if I saw it in the theater or if I saw it at home on, maybe I rented the movie or something like that. I don't remember. I have no memory of how I've seen it, but I like to think that I saw this movie in theaters. And I was impacted by this story because the movie when it came out, because it was a story that I've been aware of, like my entire childhood. It's like you grew up and it was just one of the stories that you grew up listening to or watching or reading. I don't know if I read the original short story, but I've seen depictions and adaptations of the short stories multitude of times, and it's constantly referenced in popular media. So I was really pleased with the opportunity to watch Sleepy Hollow, and I was thrilled to be able to visit it again. So come with me as we take a trip to Sleepy Hollow. There are strange murders afoot in the small, sleepy New York town. The bodies of the victims are found headless. It's clear that the heads have been cleanly chopped off as if by saber, and the heads are nowhere to be found. Constable Ichabod Crane is on the case, sent from New York City to use his unusual methods of detection to resolve the mysterious murders. In the town of Sleepy Hollow, the townfolk already know who the murderer is, the headless Hessian horseman. Can Crane's scientific techniques put an end to these supernatural murders? This movie was released November 21st, 1999, produced by Paramount Pictures, Mandalay Pictures, and Scott Rudlin Productions. It grossed over $101 million in the US and Canada and over $206 million worldwide on a reported budget of $100 million. Now, to put that into perspective and to adjust for inflation, if the movie came out today, then that would mean it would have grossed over $190 million in the US and Canada and over $388 million worldwide. And the budget would have been $188 million. Now, immediately you can see the problem. The problem is that it only grossed worldwide twice or roughly twice its production budget. And if you know about how Hollywood budgets work, they only really calculate the production budget. But on top of that, what they don't normally add to it is the marketing budget. And the marketing budget is usually about the same as the production budget. So it probably altogether cost this movie $200 million to produce and market. And the return on that was only $206 million. This is not good. This is, unfortunately, I am finding out right now in real time that this movie is probably considered a flop, and it's heartbreaking for me. Yeah. And I know and understand that there are detractors of the film, but I remember really enjoying this film when it came out. And so, and to talk about who helped put this movie together, we have Johnny Depp. He stars as Constable Ichabod Crane. You've also seen him in Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, and Donnie Brasco, and Blow. And he's made, Johnny Depp, he's made a lot of interesting choices in his acting. I don't think he's ever wanted to be conventional and sign up for conventional roles. So you'll always see him in some strange, kind of off the beat type of role. And I enjoy that for him. I'm a fan of him from watching him on 21 Jump Street, and it used to frustrate me, but I think it actually works for him. It didn't. I would say that, the other actors that were on 21 Jump Street, they did not necessarily follow the path of choosing strange or unusual roles. And as a result, or maybe not as a result, because a lot of this is luck. Apparently they were just unlucky not to have the same type of career as Depp has had. Up next is Christina Ricci. She plays Katrina Van Tassel, and she's also been in Black Snake Moan, Monster, and The Addams Family. I've been sort of a fan of Ricci since The Addams Family. I've always enjoyed her, and she's just a talent to watch, and she really melts into her roles. There are a lot of times I'm looking at a character and not knowing is Christina Ricci, so that's delightful. Up next is Miranda Richardson. She plays Lady Van Tassel, and she's also been in The Crying Game, The Hours, and Stronger. I always hear the name Miranda Richardson, but I'm never knowing that I'm either. I'm not even familiar with a lot of her work, even though I've probably seen a lot of her work. So that's an interesting thing. Up next is Michael Gambon, or it might be Gambone. I'm not exactly sure. He plays Baltus Van Tassel, and he's also been in Michael Gambone. I'm sorry, that's his name. He's also been in Gosford Park, The Cook, The Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, and Judy. I'm not exactly familiar with his work, but he's been in a lot of movies. I think most of these might be from Great Britain. He's a British actor, I think. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't do a lot of research. On to the next one. Casper Van Dyne. He plays Brom Van Brunt, and most people are most familiar with him in Starship Troopers. He's also been in Alito Battle Angel and Tarzan and the Lost City. This is one of those actors I think that did not have as strong a career in movies as and probably many people who saw Starship Troopers expected him to have. But he still has a very respectable career. So, appearing in a lot of TV shorts, videos, he's voice acting. I think he's even voice acted in video games. So he is really doing well where he's at. Jeffrey Jones plays Reverend Steinwick. He's also been in Amadeus, which we covered in episode 146, Beetlejuice, a sequel of which is coming out soon, and Ed Wood. Richard Griffiths played Magistrate Phillips. He's also been in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Ian McDiarmid plays Dr. Lancaster. You may know him from Star Wars Episode 4, Return of the Jedi. I'm sorry, that's 6. You may know him from Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, Restoration, or Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I must admit, the only thing that I've seen him in are the Star Wars movies. Michael Gohl, he plays the notary Hardenbrook. You may know him from Batman and many of the Batman movies, but he's also been in a movie called Strapless, and I should say the infamous movie called The Serpent and the Rainbow. Christopher Walken, he plays Hessian Horseman, or the Hessian Horseman. He's also been in The Deer Hunter, Catch Me If You Can, and Dune Part 2. What's very interesting about Christopher Walken in this particular role is that he kind of fits right in. And the reason he fits in because he doesn't say anything. If he had he said anything, he would have ruined it. Particularly because most of the characters in this movie are affecting a kind of British or English accent, and it's kind of a New England style English accent that you would expect in the period piece. And I'm going to offer that Christopher Walken cannot do such an accent. I think that the Walkenness of Christopher Walken would get in the way of him trying to affect such an accent. And I don't recall him ever actually doing any type of accent. He just speaks as he speaks. So given that, he says nothing in this movie. He's doesn't have any lines in this movie. And that's awesome. He's awesome as Christopher Walken. The way he emotes, his hair is all crazy. His expressions are priceless. It's great. And he just looks like he would be a headless horseman. So that's fascinating. So, Christopher Walken, as a headless horseman is precious. And actually he plays the Hessian. He basically plays the horseman when he gets his head back. Spoiler, he gets his head back at the end of the movie. So, but the thing about it is that, and I know I'm spending a lot of time on Christopher Walken, but it goes to me thinking about Dune Part 2, where he plays the Emperor, and everybody's in character, and nobody has any particular accent. Like there's no main accent in the movie. It's either slightly English sounding, or it might be foreign sounding, or it's like a flat accent. Like to an American listener, it probably would not sound like he had an accent at all. Like anybody in the film had an accent at all, but Christopher Walken in particular has this strong. It could be like a New York accent or something like that, but it sounds uniquely like him. And so when he speaks in Dune Part 2, it kind of takes you out of the movie. It would almost like it would be better if he said nothing, and we would accept him as a character in that role. But of course, it's a very important role in Dune Part 2, so he has to speak, and it kind of breaks the immersion. But you don't have that problem in this movie, Sleepy Hollow, because he doesn't say anything, and it's absolutely perfect. Moving right along, we have Mark Pickering. He plays young Macbeth. You may have seen him in Les Miserables from 2012, Clashback, or Calendar Girls. Christopher Lee plays Burgomaster. He's also been in The Wicker Man from 1973, The Girl from Nagasaki, or Dark Shadows. And finally, we have Ray Park, who plays the Headless Horseman. This is the actual Headless Horseman. Horseback, chasing people down, having a threesome fight, a three-way fight, I should say. And he's also been in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, X-Men, and G.I. Joe Retaliation. So he's a very well-known martial artist, stuntman, and as far as I know, well-wanted all-around guy. I don't know the guy, but I enjoy seeing him in stuff. This movie was directed by Tim Burton. He's also directed Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, Frankenweenie, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Batman, and Mars Attack. And I should say up into like the middle of his career is like he was basically praised for many of the movies that he made and his unique vision. But then as time went on and, you know, the subsequent movies that he made, people were not enjoying his vision as much. It was not as delightful as his earlier work. And some people might say that Tim Burton have fallen off. And nowadays there are people who actually have a negative opinion about the work that he does, which is kind of a shame. And I'm not saying I'm one of those people that are falling off, but I will say that I haven't watched a lot of, you know, the latter Tim Burton movies. Like I didn't watch Dumbo, and I hadn't watched some of the other movies that he's made in the past, I guess, 3 or 4 years. But I will be watching Beetlejuice. I am confident in that movie. Written by Washington Irving, Kevin Yeager, and Andrew Kevin Walker. Irving wrote the short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, upon which this movie is based. It's been adapted many times, and it has many forms, and there are many different takes on it. And I rather enjoy the take that they did in this movie. Yeager, he's mainly a FX and makeup artist, so he hasn't written a lot of things. The only other thing that he's ever written that he's credited for is a Tales from the Crypt episode. And then finally we have Walker. He's written The Killer. That's a movie that's recently premiered on, I want to say, Netflix. He's written Seven, that we covered in episode number 24. And Seven was a fantastic movie. Also, there's 88mm and Windfall. The music is by Danny Elfman, and he's also composed music for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Men in Black, 50 Shades of Grey, Big Eyes, Milk, The Kingdom, and Spider-Man. I think I've seen about half of these movies. Let's see, Charlie, Men in Black, Spider-Man. Okay, so 3 of these movies. But I'm almost always delighted with a Danny Elfman score. He scores movies that happen to be good or great, and his scores are almost always memorable. There is a certain cadence to it. Like they kind of sound like a Danny Elfman score most of the time. You can kind of pick out the elements of a score that he likes to use, and he'll reuse the element. It'll sound different in a different movie, but there are certain quirks that he enjoys using. And I enjoy listening to his scores. They're just fun. They're whimsical, and almost lighthearted in a way. It kind of triggers your imagination. I think the reason for that is because a lot of his scores are associated with science fiction and fantasy films. So there's almost an association with his music and fantasy. And it just makes you think of all of the delightful things that are possible in the realms of fantasy. So that's it for the opening credits. And I don't really have any announcements other than to please check out the shop at backlickcinema.com/shop. If you haven't been there in a while, go back and check it out. Check out all the neat designs that I have. And I have some ideas for some new designs. I just hadn't put them on paper yet. I had this design I have an idea for a design where it's basically a t-shirt and it says something like, common sense over nonsense, something like that. I was going to design a t-shirt, something like that. And I think it's something in a speech that I heard somebody say. It's like, that would make a great t-shirt. So, I'm thinking about that. Now that I've told you this idea, now I have to hurry up and make it before it is appropriated by somebody else. You can't steal an idea that I've already stolen. As you know, Apple Podcasts has a web browser now. If you're a fan of Apple Podcasts and you have an Apple account, or even if you don't have a Apple account, you can go and you can listen to podcasts on your web browser, or on your phone. Like, you can listen to it on your phone through your web browser. If like you're like, say you really want to listen to Apple Podcasts and you don't have an Apple phone, you can do it on your phone now through Apple Podcasts. But my fascination with it was that I thought that I could leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, because before I was doing it through iTunes, the web app for, what do you call it? I'm trying to think of what I'm using. The web app for Windows 11. But, I can't leave reviews on the web browser, and I don't know why. There's no option or button that leads you to be able to leave a review for a podcast on Apple Podcasts. So that's weird. I don't know why that would be excluded. And the other thing is that even listening to a podcast on the web browser, there's still no way, because I thought that maybe that was the restriction. Maybe I had to listen to a podcast first before I could leave a review. And that's not the case either. So I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it'll come later. But that's it. And now we get to talk about 5 of our favorite parts. So here's the thing. As I said, I really enjoyed this movie. And I think the tone of the movie is just right. Like, it's horror, but it's not grotesque horror. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not excessive. I guess I'll put it that way. It's not excessive. It's supposed to be like, more thrilling than horrifying. And it's charming in a way because of how quaint it looks. So these are the things that I think about when I watch Sleepy Hollow. It's like almost like a scary movie for children. And the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is exactly that. It was, or at least I think that was the intent, was that it's supposed to be a scary story for children. And that would make sense, being that I've been told this story many times in many different forms as I was growing up. So, and they're just thrilling. It's like a guy without a head, riding around on horseback, throwing flaming pumpkins at people. It's great. But in this version, he's not throwing pumpkins at people. He's lopping their heads off. And that's a very different tone. I'm not even sure. That's what I'm saying. That's why I don't know if I ever read the original story, because I don't think that he's lopping people's heads off in the original story. I don't think that's what Irving wrote, but it's possible. It's possible. Maybe one of you can write and tell me if that's what happens in whatchamacallit, in the original story. But anyway, let's talk about our favorite parts. So, one of my favorite parts is the opening scene. So it's almost like a cold open where you have an official person. I'm still not sure who he is. They mention his name, later in the movie, but it's like a lawyer or something like that. Somebody official. He's got some important papers and he's riding in his carriage. And it's being drawn by a coach. He's in the back of the carriage, just chilling like any rich dude in the limousine. And then he notices something funny. There's like, maybe another horseman, like riding beside the carriage, but he's not sure. And then like there's weird sounds that it feels kind of bumpy. And so he looks out the window and he kind of leans over to look at his his driver, to see what's up with this unusual feeling. I guess maybe he leans out to ask his driver a question. And when he looks out, the driver's head is gone. Like, the head is gone. It's just the body not guiding the horses. And he's terrified, and he immediately jumps out the carriage, which is which is fantastic. It's like he takes action. He's not taking any chances. And as I think about it now, it's because he knew what was going on. He knew what was happening. He knew that he was under attack. So he immediately abandons the carriage. He's wandering through the woods, or it's a cornfield. He's basically trying to get away. And then he's surprised by this. It's like a scarecrow, but it's a scarecrow with a pumpkin head. And he has seen a similar scarecrow before. He's surprised, but he's like, now he's just kind of, I don't know, just kind of waiting or something, trying to figure out what's going on. And then he hears the sound of a sword and he turns around and his head comes off. It's just off. And you see the blood splatter on the pumpkin that's on top of the scarecrow. And that's a great opening. That's a great opening for this movie. I liked how it set the tone for how the rest of the movie would go. And that it really draws you in. I really like that. I really like a movie that kind of starts off where this is what we're going to do today, folks. And it really pulls you into the story. So that's something I really enjoyed. There's also a part that I like. Well, it's not really a part, but the concept. So in the concept of this movie is that Ichabod Crane is not a school teacher as in the original tales. And I think in almost every adaptation, he's a school teacher. In this version, he's a constable or a police officer or a peace officer or however you would say it. But in this time, they refer to him as a constable. He's Constable Crane. And I like that aspect of it. They're kind of changing the story in a sense that instead of him being like a school teacher, he's just a guy who's just trying to mind his own business when he's attacked by a stranger. He's a constable. Now it's his business to find out who the stranger is and to solve these murders. He has to purposely confront the threat. And I like that change. And it's like they change his occupation, but they don't change his character. So he's still a squeamish dude, right? He's still kind of a nerd because he's, instead of a teacher, he's a scientist and he's trying to use scientific techniques to solve crimes. And he admonishes people for not using their brains. And he wants to dig deep and he wants to find the real cause of death. He wants to investigate. That's what drives him. So he's a nerd in that way. And it's like in the society that he's in, they won't let him dig deeper into the crimes. They won't let him investigate. And he finds that frustrating. It's like they're boxing him in. So that's one aspect. And the other thing is that he's squeamish. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's cowardly because he's going up against something that is otherworldly. So like, how would you react when you meet someone who is, cutting off people's heads and who himself does not have a head? That would be concerning. But at the same time, he is quite squeamish. Ichabod Crane wants to be a medical examiner or a forensics pathologist, but he's entirely too squeamish for the job. At least he hasn't really cut open enough people to get over his squeamishness. He doesn't exactly faint at the sight of blood, but he has to work to keep himself from vomiting whenever he has to do the work that he wants to do, which is an interesting characteristic of, like, he's passionate about the job, but at the same time, his job makes him sick. So this is the character that we're dealing with. And I really like that characterization in this movie. My next favorite point is, I'm basically combining these together, is that he's a guy who is trying to do his job while being disgusted and empowering through it. My next favorite part is the horsemen fighting. So basically anytime the headless horseman makes an appearance, and he's riding people down while he's on horseback, and typically he's chasing after someone who's running on foot, and he just like kind of swipes down, takes their head off, and then he circles back around and picks up his head. Stabs the head with the sword and carries the head off with him. And there's an extended fight scene where he's fighting, like he's on foot and he's fighting both Ichabod and this other gentleman caller played by Casper Van Dien. And I say other gentleman caller because there's a strange love triangle between Crane, Katrina, and she has a fiance, Brom Van Brunt, played by Casper Van Dien. So you got these three, Brunt, Crane, and the Headless Horseman. They're all fighting in this three-way battle. And that was a fantastic battle. That's what I was trying to say. And it's just the effects, probably one of the best representations that I've seen of the Headless Horseman. I'm going to add another favorite part because there was when I was talking about Constable Crane and him doing his job, it was meant to be two separate parts, but I kind of combined them together. So I want to mention that when Crane sees the horseman for the first time, or when he's exposed to the horseman, I can't remember the circumstances. I think that the horseman was chasing him down or whatever, and he's able to get away. And I think he's knocked unconscious because the horseman isn't after him, at least not initially. And the horseman tends to ignore, he's targeting specific people. He's not attacking random people. So he's knocked unconscious. Crane is. And when he comes to, he's trying to explain to the townspeople that he's seen a headless horseman and that's who's committing these murders. But the townspeople already know. It's at first like he approached it as the townspeople either hallucinating or they're just in shock because he's a man of science. So there's no way that a person there's actually a supernatural specter chopping off people's heads. He can't accept that. He's using science. So when he sees it for the first time, he's in total shock, and he's trying to tell people as if they didn't know that they had a headless horseman in their town. He's trying to explain it. He's like, you don't understand. He didn't have a head. It's like, but yeah, they knew they were the ones trying to tell you. But that was a particular scene in the movie where he's trying to get over his shock of seeing the headless horseman. And that was great. That was a primo job from Johnny Depp. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. It was humorous. It was delightful. It's the type of thing that I would expect from this film. I would expect Tim Burton to bring something like this about, and I'm glad I saw it. And finally, that's how I wrote this in my notes. So this is like at the end of the movie, basically the conclusion, where there's a huge like fight with the horsemen. That by this time it's revealed that Lady Van Tassel has basically taken control of the Headless Horseman through some witchcraft, and she's actually directing the horsemen to kill specific people. And this is in order to get an inheritance that she feels is rightfully hers. And Katrina, I think that's her daughter. I can't remember. It's all fuzzy now. It's been a week since I've seen this movie, so I can't remember the relations, but I think Christina is her daughter or stepdaughter. I can't remember. But anyway, she also practices witchcraft, and she is able to counter either she is, or with the help of Crane, they're able to counter what Lady Van Tassel has done to the Headless Horseman. And they free the horseman from the spell that he was under, where he was compulsory killing people as directed by Lady Van Tassel. So once he is free, and he knows what is done to him, I think in order to break the spell, he just had to have his head back. And Lady Van Tassel had the head. So Crane and Katrina were able to get the head. I think it was Crane specifically, but they were able to get the horseman's head away from Lady Van Tassel, and they tossed it to the headless Hessian horseman. And now he's just the Hessian horseman, because now he has his head back. So now the Hessian horseman with his head, he kind of looks around and assesses the situation. He sees Lady Van Tassel, who has been controlling him all this time, and he accosts her. He grabs her and takes her on horseback, and he had been coming out of the I guess the hollow of a tree. I don't know what you call it. It's like there's a tree. It has like a kind of opening where the roots are at, and he had been coming out of that area, I guess, presumably from the underworld or from hell, from wherever he came from the area where the tree roots meet the ground from this particular tree. And that's where he takes her. He's on horseback. He takes her. He takes a bride. That's his prize for his body being disturbed. I guess that's a way of thinking about it. So I really enjoyed that part, because I liked the resolution. Something about that pleases me. Like, it's not a resolution where you had to destroy the horseman, because the horseman really isn't responsible for what's going on. It's more like they found who was the real perpetrator, and it's the horseman who, for the most part, had been the villain in the story. Not even a real villain, because he was mind controlled. He was probably a spirit just minding his business wherever spirits mind their business after they're dead. And then this woman comes along and puts a spell on him and forces him to do a bunch of things. And he didn't appreciate being forced to do it. So once the spell was broken and he got his head back, he's able to basically take revenge on the person who did this to him. And there was something about that I found satisfying. Maybe it was the revenge part. Maybe that was it. So those are roughly 5 of my favorite parts of the movie. So now that we've talked about my 5 favorite parts, let's talk about the trivia. So we've got the trivia top 10. These are 10 of my favorite pieces of trivia from Sleepy Hollow as presented by IMDb. Johnny Depp adopted Goldeneye, the horse that played Gunpowder. That's Ichabod Crane's horse in this film, when he heard it was going to be put down. So that's neat. It's neat that he saw an animal in need and provided a home for said animal, particularly a horse. The idea of the headless horseman actually dates back to the Middle Ages in Europe, largely in Celtic and German folklore. While Washington Irving's horseman can be considered the most famous, most areas of the United States during the time of the story's publishing had their own stories of headless horsemen. Irving's is said to be inspired by the headless body of a Hessian jaeger. Jaeger is a renowned sharpshooter and horseman who was found in Sleepy Hollow. The real Van Tassels buried him in Old Dutch burying ground in an unmarked grave. Johnny Depp did all of his own stunts for the final scene where he is dragged by the horse. He had bulletproof clothing underneath his wardrobe. So that's spectacular. I hadn't really been paying attention or trying to watch for who was being a stuntman and who was not. But that's a hardy choice to do your own stunt in that instance. I suppose that if the stunt is made safe enough, then most actors would go ahead and opt for doing the stunt. Depp, who was 33 years old when he made this movie, initially found the idea of Christina Ricci who was 18 at the time, being his love interest in this film to be rather odd, seeing as how he's known her since she was 9 years old. They first met on the set of Mermaids in 1990 as Depp was dating Winona Ryder at the time. So this is a 17-year age gap, and he was 32 years old. So he thought it was kind of weird to have Christina Ricci playing his love interest. And good on Johnny for that observation. So yeah, I guess it would feel pretty weird that someone that you saw as a 9-year-old is now an adult technically, and he felt really weird about it. Now, in the defense of this age gap, I should say, they are playing in a story that's set in the 1700s, and it's not at all strange for a 20-year gap between people getting married. It's almost preferable sometimes. But nowadays, when we look at that, we're like, wow, that's kind of wild. You're old enough. She could have played your daughter. That's what that looks like. But good on him for feeling weird about that. Christina Ricci revealed on the Rosie O'Donnell show that Christopher Walken was very shy and quiet. So the other cast members had a competition over who can get him to say the most words. Miranda Richardson won by making him answer lots of questions, which is that's cute, I think. Historically, Ichabod Crane was a very unattractive man. Johnny Depp offered to add prosthetics to his face to make himself look ugly, but director Tim Burton wanted to base the character on Crane's squeamishness and eccentricity. So I also like that. I like that they sort of played against type by using a relatively handsome man to play as Ichabod Crane, and people are off-put by his weirdness, not necessarily by his looks. So that's fine. I approve of that. At the start of filming the three-way axe battle with Ray Park, Johnny Depp, and Casper Van Dine broke the index finger of his left hand. Although it was extremely painful, he carried on without telling anyone as he didn't want his part to be cut short. I know the feeling. Tim Burton included certain scenes as an homage to Disney's animated version of the Sleepy Hollow tale that are featured in The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad from 1949. These include the scene in which Ichabod Crane crosses the covered bridge and hears the frogs underneath croaking Ichabod and Headless Horseman. The following chase sequence, where Ichabod is run down and unhorsed, apparently by the Headless Horseman, and the moment in the climatic chase scene in which Ichabod runs into a tree limb and, thrown through the air, ends up landing on the horseman's horse backwards. Washington Irving claimed that Ichabod Crane and Katrina Van Tassel were real people. Ichabod Crane was based on Colonel Ichabod Bennet Crane, who was born in 1787 and fought in the War of 1812. Washington Irving and Colonel Ichabod Crane had met in 1814 at Fort Pike, located on Lake Ontario in Sackets Harbor, New York. So this is someone he knew. So that is interesting. Lastly, this is the first adaptation of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow that doesn't involve the actor playing the Headless Horseman having to conceal his head in the cloak. Thanks to advancement in technology, the head of the actor was covered with a blue mask that was deleted by means of computer graphics. The collar was also created with CGI to match the flow of the robe. So that was some of the most interesting trivia that I found on IMDb, and they had lots more trivia about this movie that you can go to IMDb and check out. So that's it for the trivia. Let's see what the critics thought. So on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it a 70%, and the audience score is 80%. and IMDb reviews gave it 7.3. What I was trying to say was that Rotten Tomatoes has a new way of presenting the audience score. So now they have what they're calling the popcorn meter. And so the popcorn meter presents as 80%. Now, I think on a lot of the earlier movies, the popcorn meter and the audience score will be basically the same thing. But in the future movies, the movies that are coming out now, since they've adopted this popcorn meter, they're still going to show the audience score, but their main score will be the popcorn meter. And that will be from folks who have bought tickets through their Fandango, the same company or something. Anyways, so the verified reviewers who buy their movies through Fandango will have their scores read as the popcorn meter. And if you're a regular audience who did not go through this process, I think their reviews are still presented on Rotten Tomatoes, but they're presented as the audience score. And to find the regular audience score, you have to click on the popcorn meter icon, and you will see the audience score and how it compares to the popcorn meter score. It's kind of the same with what they do with the critics. They have the verified critics, and then they have the rest of the critics. And when you click on the tomato icon, you'll get to see what the verified critics thinks of any particular movie, and you also be able to see like the rest of the critics, and you can do anything about review bombing or anything like that, which is why you should check out multiple sources to find out how you should view a movie, and find critics that you feel represents or have similar tastes as you do in movies, and read their reviews to find out, or listen to their podcast or whatever, to find out if any particular movie is right for you. So that was a lot of preamble to talk about these critic scores, or what these critics are thinking about Sleepy Hollow. So Christy Strauss from Wonderfully Weird and Horrifying wrote, "A supernatural splendor, gorgeously morose, Sleepy Hollow is a dark horse amid Burton's filmography." Yeah, technically, there are lots of dark horses in this movie. So yeah, I guess that works. I don't know if I would call it a dark horse, because this is basically his jam. This is his lane, making dark and scary-ish movies. I don't think that Tim Burton is he likes horror light. Let's put it that way. The most Tim Burton that Tim Burton has ever been, I believe, is Batman Returns. That one, he kind of went all out on how, the horrifying he can be. He really took it to the limit with his sensibilities. Up next is Nell Minot from Common Sense Media. She wrote, "There are lots of slasher movies better than this." This isn't a slasher movie, so I don't know why one would compare this movie to a slasher movie. I mean, yeah, there are scary elements. Yeah, people get their heads chopped off, but this movie isn't particularly gory, and it's not really meant to be that intense. It's not trying to be the intensity of a slasher movie. So I don't know why you would compare it to a slasher movie. Are there? Yeah. There, of course, there are some slasher movies better than this. You know what's also better than this? There are some action movies that are better than Sleepy Hollow. There are some romances that are better than this movie. So it's kind of a silly thing to say. I would rather that she compared this movie to another similar light horror movie, but that's not what she did. At least not in the blurb that we got on Rotten Tomatoes. Madeline Williams from Cinemata wrote, "Very stylistic, exciting, and entertaining, Tim Burton weaves an entirely new spin on the Washington Irving classic." And with this, I absolutely agree. This is exactly how I felt about this movie. I could not have said it better myself. We have Rob Blackwelder from Spliced Wire, and he wrote, without Depp's appeal or Burton's sense of humor and wildly creative style to buoy it, this script would have played like one of those overproduced, under-intelligent literature plunders that network TV runs during Sweeps Week. He's probably right about that. Where he's absolutely right is the elements of Depp and Burton making this movie better. I mean, there's a reason why certain actors are chosen to play certain roles. There's a reason why certain directors are chosen to bring certain movies to the forefront or certain stories to theaters. There's a reason why you put certain people in places, because when you got the right people in the proper places, they make the whole project better. And a lot of times the project is poorer when you don't have the right people. And he's absolutely right about that aspect of it. Would it have been just a run-of-the-mill TV of the weeks? It's hard to say. They might have been able to get a different actor that could elevate the role. A different director that could equally elevate the role. Equally, a poorer actor or a poor group of actors and a weaker director would have yielded a weaker movie. I agree, but at the same time, there's a reason why you put certain people in certain places. So finally, Sleepy Hollow is, as of this recording, available with a subscription on Amazon Prime Video. That's it for today. Next week, I'm joined by the amazing author Emily Marinelli, and her book, soon to be released, is called Comfort Sequels: The Psychology of Movie Sequels from the 80s and 90s. And we're going to talk about Philadelphia, a movie that famously produced no sequels. You can follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlookcinema.com, and on YouTube, where you can also leave a like or subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're gonna be anything, be outstanding.